Fun facts about the Parthenon frieze in the Wilcox Classical Museum. The Wilcox Classical Museum holds sections of the Parthenon frieze in the form of plaster casts from the north part of the frieze showing cavalry and from the east part of the frieze showing the peplos scene. This diagram illustrates all four friezes, the North Frieze, the South Frieze, the East Frieze, and the West Frieze. And then in bright red indicates the sections that we have casts of in our museum. KU acquired these casts over about 25 years from the late 19th to the early 20th century, or the early 1880s to about 1910. When you visit the museum today, you see the panels from the East Frieze displayed like this on the right in two rows, one stacked on top of the other. And then you see the casts from the North Frieze, the cavalry panels, here on the left, and then several more cavalry panels are displayed in other parts of the museum. Our museum does not communicate very well the architectural context, the spatial context for the Parthenon frieze, and this is something that we would like to improve upon in the future. Museums that hold the originals of the Parthenon frieze, such as the British Museum in London, or the Louvre in Paris, or the new Athenian Acropolis Museum in Athens, all of these museums have struggled to communicate how the Parthenon frieze was displayed. An archaeological drawing like this does a good job of communicating where the Parthenon frieze was located on the building, but it does take some explanation. So everything in white is preserved, everything in yellow is what has been restored in the drawing. And the Parthenon frieze's East Frieze is shown up there at the top of the drawing, with the peplos scene in the middle, directly over the central intercolumniation. So the Wilcox collection is fortunate to have nearly all of the East Frieze as shown in this drawing. This computer reconstruction, created by the University of Southern California about 15 years ago, is very useful to communicate how the Parthenon frieze was originally displayed in the Parthenon. This computer reconstruction communicates, for instance, how high up on the building the Parthenon frieze was displayed and how difficult it would have been to see or view from vantage points below. The coloring that you see in the computer model is something that we'll be talking about in a few weeks when we talk about polychromy and color in ancient Greek and Roman sculpture. Here we're moving on to another subject. Students and visitors to the Wilcox Museum often observe that the heads of the East Frieze are usually not preserved very well. And in this case, here's a good example. These are three figures from the peplos scene of the East Frieze, and the heads look like they were never even made to begin with. But this is not true. The heads have been removed by someone. The heads were disfigured intentionally sometime in the post-classical period, sometime after around AD 350. Someone has come along and chiseled the faces away. This was commonly done after the fall of the Western Roman Empire and with the rise of Christianity as the dominant religious and political force in the Mediterranean world. Here's another panel from the East Frieze showing three more heads that have been removed. That's the god Hermes there in the middle. And here's a short video that your instructor put together. It's a kind of a reenactment of what was attempted in this case, but was not fully accomplished. Look at those chisel marks behind the head, those deep gouges that you see there. The arrow should help you understand where they are if you're having trouble seeing them. That is the attempt to chip off that head using a hammer and a chisel, or a hammer and some kind of metal gouge. And in this reenactment, keep in mind this is only a reenactment, you'll see Professor Stinson illustrating how this would have been done with a hammer and chisel. We're lucky that we have these heads, because obviously someone was starting to remove them, but for reasons that are unclear today, they didn't finish the job. And in this last short video and illustration, we see two heads that are beautifully well preserved. These are heads of two gods seated to the right of the peplos scene. I show this to illustrate the relief carving that was done by the carvers of the Parthenon frieze. The head on the right appears to be carved in the round, and understandable from different viewing angles. The head on the left, too, is visible and clearly understandable in 3D from this angle, but as this video shows, if you turn around the side of that head, the illusion is quickly lost, and the carving reveals itself to be quite two-dimensional, whereas the head on the right is much more 3D from almost any viewing angle. The relief carvers, in comparison to carvers of stone sculptures in the round, had the limitation of the thickness of the marble slab that they were working with. But as the Parthenon frieze illustrates, Greek sculptors became very adept at creating the illusion of three-dimensionality, even when they only had a very thin slab of marble to work with.